and him who defends. For it is evident, that if the written law indeed is contrary to the affair, the common law must be used, and equity, as being more just. And it is also evident that the best decision will be given when the written laws are not entirely used. The equitable likewise always remains and never changes. And this too is the case with common law. For it is according to nature, but written laws are frequently changed. Hence also it is said in the Antigone of Sophocles, (for Antigone says as an apology that she acted contrary to the law of Creon, but not contrary to the unwritten law), Nor could I ever think a mortal's law of power or strength sufficient to abrogate the unwritten law divine, immutable, eternal, not like these, of yesterday, but made ere time began. Shall man persuade me then to violate heaven's great commands, and make the gods my foes ? It is likewise evident that the just is something true and advantageous, but not that which seems to be so. So that what is written is not law, for it does not perform the work of law. It may likewise be said that a judge is like an assayer of silver and gold ; for it is his province to distinguish what is truly just from what is adulterate. And also that it is the business of a better man rather to use unwritten than written laws, and to abide by their decision. It must likewise be considered whether the law in force is contrary to a law which is approved, or is itself contrary to itself. And when the one law commands all contracts to be firmly observed, and the other forbids any contracts to be made contrary to law. It must also be considered whether the law is ambiguous, so that it may be distorted, and then it must be seen to what part the just is to be adapted, or the advantageous, and afterwards the law is to be used. If also the things for which the law was established no longer remain, but the law itself remains, this we must endeavour to render manifest. And thus the law must be opposed by showing that things being changed, the law also is to be changed and abrogated. But if the written law is adapted to the occasion or the fact, then it must be said, as the result of the best decision, that the law was established, not for the sake of judging contrary to law, but in order that he may not be perjured who may happen to be ignorant what the law says. It must likewise be asserted that no one chooses that which is simply good, but that which is good to himself, and that it makes no difference whether laws are not established, or are not used. Likewise, that in other acts it is of no advantage to dispute against the masters of them. Thus for instance, it is not expedient for one who is sick to dispute against the prescriptions of the physician ; for the error of the physician is not so injurious as it is to be accustomed to disobey a ruler. To endeavour likewise to become wiser than the laws is that which is forbidden in celebrated laws. And thus much concerning laws. With respect to witnesses, however, there are two kinds ; for some are ancient, but others modern. And of the latter, some are partakers of danger, but others are exempt from it. But I call ancient witnesses the poets and other illustrious persons whose judgments and opinions are manifest. Thus the Athenians made use of Homer as a witness about Salamis ; the Tenedians of Periander the Corinthian against the Sigians ; and Cleophon made use of the elegies of Solon against Critias, in order that he might show that the family of Critias was formerly contumacious. For otherwise Solon would never have said, Bid Critias with his yellow locks his father's will obey. Such, therefore, are the witnesses about things that are past. But with respect to future events, those who interpret oracles are witnesses. As for instance, Themistocles, when he said that the wooden wall, mentioned by the oracle, signified that the Athenians must betake themselves to their ships. Proverbs also are witnesses. Thus, if some one should deliberate whether he should form a friendship with an old man, the proverb testifies what he is to do, which says, never confer a benefit on an old man. Thus, also, for him who deliberates whether he shall slay the children whose parents he has likewise slain, there is this proverb, he is a fool who having slain the father, leaves the children. Modern or recent witnesses, however, who have no share in the danger, are such as being illustrious have given a decision in a court of justice. For the judgments of these men are useful in the confirmation of what is doubtful. Thus Eubulus, in a court of justice, employed against Chares, what Plato had said against Archibius, that it was common in the city for men to acknowledge themselves to be depraved. Those also are recent witnesses who partake of the danger of being punished if they appear to have given false evidence. Persons therefore of this description are alone witnesses in things of this kind, viz. Whether the thing has been done or not, and whether it is or not, but they are not witnesses concerning the quality of the thing, as whether it is just or unjust, advantageous or disadvantageous. Remote witnesses, however, are the most worthy of belief in things of this kind, but the ancients are most worthy of belief, for they cannot be corrupted. The credibility, however, derived from witnesses is to be employed as follows. When indeed there are no witnesses, it is necessary to judge from probabilities, and this it is to employ the best decision. Probabilities also cannot be corrupted by money, and they are not condemned for giving a false testimony. But he who has witnesses ought to say to him that has not, that witnesses may be tried and punished, but probabilities cannot. It may also be added, that there would be no occasion for witnesses, if arguments from probabilities were sufficient. Testimonies, however, are either concerning ourselves, or concerning our opponents. And some indeed are concerning the thing itself, but others concerning the manners of persons. Hence it is manifest that we can never be in want of useful testimony. For if the testimony does not relate to the thing, it will either be favourable to the defendant, or adverse to the plaintiff. But the testimony respecting manners will either evince our probity, or the depravity of our opponent. Other particulars, however, respecting a witness, whether he be a friend, or an enemy, or neither, whether he be a man of reputation, or an infamous character, or neither, and whatever other differences there may be of the like kind, must be derived from the same places from which enthymemes are derived. With respect to compacts, an oration is so far useful as it increases or diminishes their authority, or so far as it renders them credible or unworthy of belief. For it is favourable to the speaker to show that the compacts possess credibility and authority, but the contrary is favourable to the opponent. The same arguments, therefore, are to be employed in showing that compacts are worthy or unworthy of belief, as we have employed in the affair of witnesses. For such as those persons are who have subscribed and signed the compacts with respect to being worthy or unworthy of belief, such also are the compacts. When, however, it is acknowledged by the litigants that compacts were made, if this acknowledgment is appropriate, the authority of the compacts is to be increased. For a compact is a private law, and is of a partial nature. And compacts indeed do not give authority to the law, but the laws give authority to legal compacts. And in short, the law itself is a certain compact, so that he who disbelieves in and subverts a contract, subverts the laws. Farther still, many contracts and voluntary transactions are affected by compacts, so that if compacts lose their authority, the intercourse of men with each other must be subverted. Other things also, which are adapted to the confirmation of compacts, the orator will perceive by himself. But if the compacts are adverse to the cause, and favourable to the opponents, in the first place, those are adapted to the purpose which some one may urge to invalidate the force of the contrary law. For it is absurd that we should think laws are not to be obeyed, which have not been established rightly but by fraud, and that we should not think it necessary to observe compacts which have been rightly made. In the next place, it must be said that a judge is a dispensator of what is just, and therefore that his attention is not to be directed to the observance of the compacts, but to that which is more just. And the just indeed is not to be perverted either by fraud or by necessity, for it has a natural subsistence. But compacts are made both by persons who are deceived, and those who are compelled. In addition to these things, also, it is requisite to consider whether the compact is contrary to any written or common law, and to things just or beautiful, and besides this, whether it is contrary to any posterior or prior contracts. For either the posterior contracts are binding, but the prior have no authority.